Have you ever noticed that we're constantly trying to both categorize and measure language ability? A1, B2, C1. But when was the last time someone stopped you on the street in Paris and asked you, "Excuse me, are you a B1 or a B2 French speaker?" Truth is, in the real world, these labels fade away, replaced by something much more fundamental. Can you actually connect with another human being in your target language? What if there is a less robotic, less academic, more human, more intuitive way of thinking about language proficiency? Recently, I found myself thinking about these language apps that'll tell you something like, you are 43% fluent in the language. Not 42, definitely not 44, precisely 43% fluent. And it gets you thinking, what does this even mean? For instance, when I traveled to China earlier this year, I didn't feel 43% connected to the Chinese people around me. I either felt understood or I didn't. Years ago, when I first started learning Japanese through comprehensible input, I had this wild thought. I imagined being dropped into rural Japan. No smartphone, no map, no English translators, and asking myself, could I not only get where I wanted to go, but also form meaningful relationships with native Japanese speakers along the way, regardless of if there were some miscommunications, some grammar errors, and maybe you forgot a word or two along the way? That goal is what I considered to be conversational fluency, and it has been my North Star ever since. By the way, as we get into this, if you're interested in conversational fluency yourself and the way I learn languages, then feel free to take a look at the link in the description. At its core, the way I see conversational fluency is the ability to navigate life confidently in another language and make meaningful connections along the way through that language. It is not about scoring perfect test scores on grammar study or knowing obscure vocabulary in your target language. It's about being able to order food, make friends, tell a joke, watch a movie or two, be able to express yourself without anxiety or the constant need to translate from your mother tongue. We can think of a language kind of like swimming. The CEFR levels or the academic measurements are kind of like timing your laps or measuring the efficiency of each backstroke. They're definitely useful metrics for certain contexts and certain people, especially academic or professional ones. But conversational fluency? That's simply about being in the water confident enough that you can have fun and that you're not gonna drown. Okay, so let's look at the concept of conversational fluency through some everyday examples. Imagine you're traveling in the Great Mexico City. The CEFR framework might tell you something like this. You need a B2 level of Spanish to interact with a degree of fluency and spontaneity that makes regular interaction with native speakers quite possible without strain for either party. Now, that sounds great in theory, but what does it mean in actual practice? Conversational fluency breaks this down into real human experiences. Consider Maria, who studied Spanish in school for years. She memorized conjunction tables and knew grammar rules like the back of her hand. She might score pretty high on a standardized test. Then there's Jake, who spent 6 months using comprehensible input methods, listening to Spanish podcasts, watching Spanish YouTubers, and regularly practiced with language exchange partners. Now, when they both visit Madrid, Jake might make more grammatical mistakes, but he connects effortlessly with locals, navigates daily situations with ease, and enjoys his experience far more authentically than Maria, who hesitates to speak out of fear of making mistakes that all her textbooks told her were a big no-no. Now, the psychological research on language learning actually supports these claims. Studies show that meaning-focused communication, actually using the language to express real thoughts with others, leads to more robust and longer-lasting acquisition. Our brains are wired for connection and communication, not for memorizing boring conjunction tables. And even if some academic tells you that that's not accurate, just ask yourself which method you would rather do, because at the end of the day, the mediocre method that you do is infinitely better than the perfect one that you don't. This leads to what we can call the connection over perfection framework. Instead of asking yourself questions like, what CEFR level am I? Ask yourself these 3 questions. Can I express my thoughts and feelings in a way that native speakers seem to consistently understand? Question 2, can I understand others when they express themselves to me? And 3, can I navigate daily situations that are meaningful to me without constant stress or the need for constant translation? If you can answer yes to these 3 questions, then congratulations. You've achieved conversational fluency regardless of what some standardized test might say about your abilities. Thinking about a language this way doesn't just shift how we approach our studies. When we prioritize connection over perfection, we remove many of the psychological barriers that actually prevent us from acquiring that language in the first place. Fear of making mistakes? Much less intimidating when your goal is about being understood, not about being perfect. Anxiety about not knowing every word? Completely vanishes when you realize that native speakers just appreciate your effort to understand them and be understood, regardless of occasional errors. Frustration with slow progress on formal metrics, replaced by joy in each meaningful conversation that you have. Again, I will remind you that if this approach to language learning resonates with you at all, then check the link in the description where you can book a free call with either me or someone from my team. This approach also better aligns with why most people learn languages in the first place. A quick Google search online will reveal to you why people learn languages if you're interested. The top motivations were travel, connecting with people from other cultures, and consuming media like music, books, and films. Very few cited things like having a C2 certification as their primary goal. And yet so much of the language learning community remains fixated on these formal assessments rather than the genuine human connection that the majority of us desire. But here's the surprising thing about conversational fluency. It often accelerates formal language too. When you focus on meaningful connection and dive into authentic content you actually enjoy, you're engaging with it in the most natural and effective way. From what I've seen, studies in second language acquisition seem to consistently show that learners who engage with comprehensible input content, again, language that they can understand from context, actually progress faster than those who just engage with rigid grammatical syllabi. So next time someone asks you something like, well, what level are you in Spanish? Or, are you fluent in Japanese yet? Perhaps consider a different answer. Perhaps you might say, I'm conversationally fluent. I can share my thoughts, I can understand the thoughts of others, and I can navigate daily life. All in all, I'm comfortable in the language. And this is why at Fluency Formula, I always talk about conversational fluency. And look, maybe that does correspond to a B1 level in the CEFR framework for some people. And then for others, that might be a C1 or even a C2. I'm not saying CEFR doesn't matter. I'm just saying that honestly, I'm not really sure. And honestly, I don't really care. So I'm curious, how do you think about language learning and the levels associated with it? Are you chasing a specific level, or are you just chasing comfortable communication? I would love if you shared your thoughts with me in the comments. After all, I read all of them and respond to just about all of them. So whether or not you agree with me or disagree with me, regardless of where you stand, I encourage you to stay curious both about languages and the human connections that make them interesting. Oh, and if you're really as curious as you probably should be about learning a language, then you should probably watch this video right here, because this might just answer the question about language learning that you've been burning to know the answer to. See you in the next video.